So everyone loves GraphQL, right? And why wouldn't you? That flexibility is a dream for developers. But here's a thought. What if that exact same flexibility is also a giant, flashing welcome sign for attackers? That's what we're digging into today. The hidden and honestly kind of scary security costs of GraphQL. So what's the big promise of GraphQL? It's all about ultimate flexibility. Your front end can ask for exactly the data it needs. No more overfetching, no more underfetching. It's just efficient. And that's exactly why it took the development world by storm. But, and there's always a but, isn't there? This is the core question we're tackling today. What happens when that incredible power, that amazing flexibility gets flipped and used against you? It turns out the very thing that makes GraphQL so fantastic is also what opens the door to some really serious security problems. All right, so to really get this, we've got to talk about what I like to call the flexibility trap. It's this idea that GraphQL's greatest strength can actually become its most dangerous weakness. Let's break it down. Okay, this slide right here nails the fundamental difference. Think about a traditional REST API. It's like a fortress with a bunch of small, heavily guarded doors. Post to users, get to products. Each door leads to one specific, predictable place. Now GraphQL, it's like that same fortress, but with one single, massive, wide-open main gate. Super convenient for your friends, for sure, but it also means any would-be attackers have one giant, juicy target to focus all their efforts on. So, how exactly does an attacker turn this flexibility into a weapon? Well, let's get into the specifics. We're going to look at some of the nasty attack vectors they use. And a lot of them boil down to one thing: denial of service through resource exhaustion. First on our list is something called a depth-oriented attack. This one is sneaky. An attacker crafts a query that just keeps nesting deeper and deeper into relationships. And with each new level of nesting, the work your server has to do can grow exponentially. It can get out of hand, fast. And look at this example. It perfectly shows what I mean. It looks so simple, right? Friends of friends of friends. You repeat that just a handful of times, and suddenly this tiny, innocent-looking query is forcing your server to make thousands, maybe even millions of database lookups, all from one little request. Okay, so if the last attack was about going deep, this next one is all about going wide. It's the breadth-oriented attack. Instead of nesting, an attacker uses a built-in GraphQL feature called aliases. Basically, aliases let you ask for the same piece of data multiple times in a single query, just with different names. And you can see where this is going. Yeah, check this out. Imagine an attacker wants the 100 most recent posts, but instead of asking once, they use aliases to ask for that same list 26 different times in one single request. To your server, this looks like a valid query. So it goes off and tries to fetch 2,600 posts, which can totally swamp your database and your network. And believe me, the list doesn't stop there. Attackers can overload the parser with ridiculously complex queries, create recursive loops that expand into a nightmare, or batch a ton of heavy operations together. And one of the biggest ones? They can use GraphQL's own introspection feature, which is a helpful tool for developers, to basically get a complete map of your entire API, letting them plan their attack perfectly. It's like giving a burglar the blueprints to your house. Okay, so these vulnerabilities are real, and they are scary. But the big question is, what can we do about them? How hard is it to actually protect your API? Let's pivot now and talk about the price of protection. We'll compare what it takes to secure a GraphQL API versus a good old-fashioned REST API. And let's be clear, securing GraphQL is a serious commitment. This isn't just about adding one little piece of middleware and calling it a day. We're talking about a major engineering effort to build and maintain several different layers of defense. It's a whole strategy. Yeah, if you want to do this right, you need a whole arsenal of defenses. You've got to implement things like depth limiting to stop those crazy nested queries we saw. You need complexity analysis, which basically scores a query's potential cost before you even run it. You also need to cap how many aliases and fields someone can request. You might even have to go as far as only allowing pre-approved, persisted queries. Each one of these is a significant piece of work. Now let's contrast that with REST. Look how much simpler this list is. For REST, the fixes are pretty standard stuff. You enforce limits on the size of the request body. You reject arrays that are just way too big. You whitelist which filter parameters are allowed. You do some basic rate limiting per endpoint. A lot of this stuff is just handled by mature, battle-tested middleware that you can set up in minutes. The difference in the amount of work for your team is just huge. All right, this all leads us to the grand finale. It's time for a head-to-head showdown.
Let's put GraphQL and REST side by side and see who comes out on top when it comes to security.
So yeah, let's get right to it. We're going to judge them on a few key security criteria and see how they really measure up against each other.
Okay, let's go through this table row by row. First up, attack surface. With GraphQL, you've got that single, infinitely flexible endpoint, which is a massive target. REST, on the other hand, has multiple, fixed, predictable endpoints. Point for REST. Next, work predictability. With REST, you know exactly what kind of workload to expect from each endpoint. With GraphQL, an incoming query could be tiny or it could be a monster. You just don't know. Another point for REST. How about out-of-the-box safety? GraphQL comes with minimal protections built in. You have to add all the guards yourself. REST has a whole ecosystem of mature middleware ready to go. And finally, developer overhead. As we just saw, securing GraphQL is a huge job. With REST, it's way more straightforward. The winner here seems pretty clear when you look at it this way. So when you lay out all the evidence like that, the source material comes to a pretty clear conclusion. If your main priorities are strong security and not burying your developers in extra work, then JSON REST is really the way to go. It gives you predictable work, you can use all this existing battle-tested middleware, and you just flat out reduce the risk of these crazy resource exhaustion attacks.
And that brings us to the final question, and this one is for you to think about. When you're starting your next project, what are you going to prioritize? Is it the total awesome flexibility that GraphQL offers, or is it the predictable, hardened security that comes with REST? There's no single right answer for every situation, but now you know exactly what the trade-offs are, so you can make that choice with your eyes wide open.